Okay, we're gonna give this a shot. Welcome to Hoops in the P.N.W. I'm Coach Edens, and some things have changed. I think since the last time we did one of these with Coach Wiggers from Nooksack Valley. Our hope was to get some other state championship coaches, and maybe it was the end of the season or end of the school year and summer basketball, and run into some issues with just trying to get some more bodies on. But it's been a little while, and I myself actually have made a pretty big change in my coaching profession, which was certainly challenging at the time. I resigned the head job at Lake Stevens High School and took over at Issaquah High School in the middle of June. And I'm coaching those young ladies currently. We're just starting the district tournament here on Thursday, and looking forward to that. And so there's a lot of things to do. It's been an intriguing, different, strange, surreal, all of those things that you could probably think of when you go through a transition, and especially with a girls basketball job. That's probably, to be fair, probably for another show. But nonetheless, I know that my son and Ella's brother, he listens to these here a little bit on his travels from Pullman to back home and back and forth. And he had suggested that we do one together. Ella, of course, is my daughter and is a college freshman up at Western, and so played for me as a hooper at Lake Stevens. And so the more I thought about it, the more I felt like it was a good opportunity to kind of come from maybe a little bit of a player's perspective, being a coach's kid, and some of those things that maybe myself didn't realize or don't realize, but also, maybe can help those moms and dads that are coaching their kids here soon, or maybe currently coaching their kids, and what that's all about. So as for Ella here, before she kind of gets a chance to say a thing or two, she's my oldest daughter. My youngest is a junior at Lake Stevens and is a horse rider, Casey. And then Carter, as I mentioned earlier, boy, he's a Washington State University Coug. I'm kind of supporting both. I got my Wazoo beanie. I got my Western sweatshirt. He's a senior over there and is looking to become a history teacher, and I think coach too at some point. But anyways, we're fortunate. My wife and I, Kim, we're fortunate to have great kids, and this is just a fun thing that obviously we got started with COVID. We needed something to do. We got locked down almost 4 some years ago. And so we're going to pursue this. So we're going to see how this goes. This is on a Google Meet, which normally we do these on Zoom. So we'll see if this pans out, and if it does, great. So Ella, up there in your dorm room at Western, give us a little bit of hoops background. So these guys, whoever's listening, kind of knows a little bit of your hoops story, because I think that sometimes gets skewed sometimes. So what do you got?
Well, I started playing basketball in first grade with one of the color teams. I don't remember it might have been Blue Sharks
Yes.
to start off. Maybe like Red Cheetahs. Started there for a bit with some colored wristbands.
Now, why do these young teams always have to have a color mixed in? Red Cheetahs, Blue Sharks.
So I'm not sure. Make it more kid friendly, to make it more fun.
Maybe. Okay.
There's some random ones though.
Yeah.
But then played for some AAU teams in Marysville, and then eventually we switched to the Buckies. That looked like Golden State Warrior jerseys.
Yep.
Not the prettiest. Then transferred over to Lake Stevens AAU for 2-3 years.
I think that's probably 2 or 3.
2 or 3.
Maybe 3. Yep.
And then high school basketball started. Finally, from just sitting on the bench for years and years to now actually playing for you.
Now, when you say sitting on the bench, you mean
sitting at the end of the bench just as a little kid.
Right, just as an observer around the program, all those kind of good things, right?
Wanting to be as close to the basketball girls as I could get.
That's true. That is very true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then you did the Buckies. What other programs? We kind of had to improv a little bit with COVID. What did we do there?
Oh yeah, we went to the Cascades.
Yep.
which practices were like 2.5, 3 hours away for like 6 hours.
Yep.
And that took up the whole month of July, traveling to different places in California. I think we played in Arizona.
Yep.
It's a lot of traveling, just weekend to weekend. And so I didn't get to spend a lot of time at home, but it was fun. It was definitely an adventure, but just maybe a one-time adventure with that.
Now, when we talk about the Cascades, obviously there wasn't, again, we're right in the midst of COVID and trying to find,
Mhm.
something for you to do and participate in. And to be fair, it was really the only program I felt
Yeah.
like at Eastern Washington, but Western Washington that was available and someone open. And
Yeah.
so what are we talking? We're talking about in between your freshman and sophomore year,
Yeah.
where essentially you played a little bit for us as a freshman. We called you up
Mhm.
about halfway point, and we didn't know how long, of course, COVID was gonna last. Was that gonna trickle over into the winter season? Your sophomore
Yeah.
year, what was that gonna look like? And ultimately, we couldn't get you to a place where you didn't pick up a basketball for 18 months, and then expect you to still
Mhm.
play. Um, but in terms of the Cascades, was that a pretty massive leap up from what you had played before, club wise?
It Yes, it was for sure because it was kinda like the first, besides obviously high school basketball, the first dip in the toe with, like, higher level AAU teams, because AAU teams play way more different than high school does.
Mm,
And so, it was definitely a step up, and I wasn't expecting it, so it took me time to adjust, and it was, like, new coach and
yep,
everything, and so it was a lot of new experiences that took a lot of learning, and the practices were more intense. Everything felt like it had to be that you had to know what you were doing, like, right away, so, of course, there were
yep,
older girls, and I was one of the younger ones, so you'd
yep,
always have to go off of them, but it was nice to see their view of it because I think Cascades was newer, but still had a few years under their belt, but it was definitely a new experience.
well, Cascades itself with Coach Aldridge, Coach Al, been around a long time, decent time. Now,
Mhm.
I don't think you mentioned. Did you mention Swarm before that? You were with the
Oh,
Swarm
I
a little
didn't.
bit.
Mm-mm.
So you went from Bucky's. How many years are we thinking there? Year or two,
Yeah.
and then Swarm for probably 2 or 3. I felt like that was a little longer,
I feel yeah, that one was definitely long. That took up a lot of time also,
right?
but
And then did you feel like Cascades were even just another step up from
Mhm.
Swarm?
Yeah, I would say intensity-wise with Swarm, it depended on the coach that you had.
Yep,
Kinda like, 'cause, there would be trainings also, and you'd have, like, a training and then a practice in, like,
yep,
one day,
yep,
and so that's a pretty I haven't really thought about the comparison between those 2 clubs. I feel like it was in different type of intensity with the 2,
sure.
but both that were very, like, valuable, but definitely, like, different.
Now, not to give too much away about your personality, of course,
Mhm.
because you remember the first day we went to Cascades. Do you remember that little
Yes.
exchange?
Yeah.
How'd that shake down?
A breakdown or 2. Didn't wanna do it. I got blisters from not changing socks because
Mm,
I wasn't very smart, but I kept telling you I didn't wanna go back, and then it ended up being pretty fun,
yeah.
but
Well,
just new things. I don't like new things.
yeah. No, and that's fair. And I think that's kind of where I'm going with this whole thing. We're probably a little jaded because your dad's a high school coach.
Mhm.
And so you have one perspective of high school basketball and athletics
Yeah.
because your dad coaches cross country, of course. And that's
Mhm.
something you do. Obviously, you're going to school up at Western for cross country and track. And
Yeah.
the irony, of course, that you're at school for running and not basketball, which many of your peers kind of felt like it was going to be the other way around.
I wish it was I miss basketball.
Yes, no, I understand that.
Sometimes I do.
Sure. But the reality is, when you started new things, even going back to your younger days, with the Blue Sharks and the Red Cheetahs and whomever else it might have been. One of my big fears being a coach, because I was the coach at Lake Stevens your whole little basketball career, right?
Mhm.
And so one of my biggest fears, of course, with your youth coaches and to that degree, your club coaches, not that I was too worried about, Coach DeShane or Coach Al
Mhm.
or whatever, is, I didn't want your coaches to know that I was a high school head coach,
Yeah.
because my fear was they'd be always nervous about me judging or thinking we're not doing what's best for you, or Case, even when she played, or Carter, and our bottom line was, and you've heard me share this with you before, was one, that you were having fun, two, you were learning some skills, and three, not to worry about me. I'd
Mhm.
rather they didn't know who I was, so then that way you could just go play. And I think for the most part we did a pretty good job of that. But ultimately, I think kind of where that switched was you having said, being been around the program, for as long as you were, just as a fan, a little spectator, and wanting to be like those young
Mhm.
ladies. You kind of see the good, bad, and the ugly of all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And so with those new club experiences, I think what was hard is trying not to um, maybe skew your perspective of what basketball could look like. I mean, I think we give you kind of a filtered version here when you played for us, these past few years. And at the same time, you kind of needed to do the new experience thing too, I think, to grow. Wouldn't you
Yeah.
agree?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
Um, when you look at the comparisons, and you talked about it a little bit already. Oh, well, let me back this up a little bit. Before you were a high school player or an athlete,
Mhm.
were you dreaming about being a varsity basketball player?
Mhm.
What were you thinking? What was kind of your aspirations, do you think?
Was by my senior year to start for you. I was always nervous because 'cause I'm not high scorer, leading scorer.
Yeah.
I'm not that type of be all end all player, so I was always nervous going into, like, tryouts, like, freshman year.
Yeah.
I would never start for you, because
Hmm.
like, you're varsity coach, Merrifield is JV coach.
Yep.
Love Merrifield, I would love to play for him again, but it was always my fear that I wouldn't make the varsity team ever because and, like, not play for you. Like, I'm
Yeah.
playing on your team, but I'm not necessarily playing for you.
Right.
And so, that was my big I, of course, wanted to go to the Tacoma Dome. That was the ultimate dream, was to be playing for you and
Yeah.
make it to the Tacoma Dome at least one of the years, and then
Yeah.
we did, which was a dream come true.
Now, did you have expectations, let's say like your freshman year, did you have expectations on what was like kind of your best case scenario, you think, going into your freshman year?
Um, Best case scenario pretty much just to develop a leadership role just on the JV team. I did not expect to be pulled up to varsity my freshman year,
Hmm.
and so at Mariner,
Yep.
when you tapped Pearl and I's shoulder, I was like, I thought we were in trouble because they're like, "Okay, you gotta go to the locker room." I was like, "Oh gosh." Then they're like, "Oh, you gotta change." I'm like, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah.
But my main thing was to just pick up a leadership role, even though I was a freshman and there were some sophomores, maybe juniors, I think,
It
were
might be.
on
Yep.
JV team.
Yep.
But especially being a point guard,
Yep.
learning, and that's basically my freshman year was just learning how high school plays. Because obviously high school, like I said earlier, is different than AAU, and obviously from freshman to senior year, you're gonna have to learn a lot, and learn how to play with new people also.
Yeah.
So,
What do you think the biggest difference is between AAU and high school basketball
oh
that you
gosh,
remember?
just being organized.
What do you mean by that?
Um, like you always, it's kind of like a free for all with AAU.
Okay.
And I feel like high school is more structured and more disciplined than AAU would be, because a lot of AAU stuff is just like, "Look at me."
Yeah.
Like, obviously, you're trying to get offers. That's what I feel like a lot of the tournaments we went to with Cascades
Yep.
was a
Yep.
lot of just viewings.
Sure.
And maybe you don't really see a whole lot of colleges coming to high school games. I mean,
Right.
yeah, maybe every once in a while, but it's not like you have specific tournaments for viewing.
Right.
So then you have these star players on your team that are kind of wanna be ball hogs because they see these recruits on the sidelines and
Right.
wanna show off, and so then becomes a free for all, but I feel
Yeah.
like with high school, it's more almost relaxed with that type. You don't
Mhm.
necessarily see a whole lot more of woe is me type players. It's more team oriented.
Now, do you think that was maybe based on the experience you had with dad and maybe kind of what you've grown up with and what you've seen? I mean, obviously you have friends that play for other high school teams. Do you feel like they necessarily had the same structure type of environments? Because again, I'm just one coach that does it a specific way. Obviously, there are
Mhm.
many others that do it many different ways. Do you feel like a lot of maybe your friends that play for other teams have similar structure, or let me rephrase that, maybe not similar structure, but more structure with their high school programs than they did with their club teams? You think that's pretty much the same across the board?
I feel like it definitely could be. Maybe not necessarily for everyone. I feel like it kinda depends on, like, the club team you've played for. Because I know there are definitely probably some club teams that are very team oriented, and it's not like some coaches won't put up with that type of stuff.
Yep.
Because college recruits, they're not always gonna wanna see the ball hog number 1 player. It's
Hmm.
kinda also off-ball things too.
Sure.
Um, but that's one thing I've always told people about the way you coach. I don't know
Uh-oh.
how your IQ is, like, so crazy high, how you just see that's something I've always admired, especially when my senior year. I feel like I really took a jump from just junior to senior year about understanding the game and understanding how you see it.
Yep.
I feel like that's how we connected so much my senior year so drastically is because I was starting to see the way you see it
Yep.
and, like, in timeouts after, like, a play, or you would
Yep.
see a play happen before it even happened, and I was like, "What the heck?"
Yeah.
Just the way you scout, like, I swear no other coach scouts as much as you do, that puts in all of that team-oriented stuff that I
Yeah.
have always admired, so I don't know how how many other coaches are like that, obviously, because, I mean, I've been around you forever, so
Sure. Well, I appreciate
and
that. I appreciate that. I think one of the biggest things that, and we've talked about this before, of course, what made last year so hard. I actually shared this with the girls at Issaquah. We got to this point of the season a year ago, and both, well, at least myself, but I think we both kind of had shared, we didn't want to think about when the
mm-mm,
last one was going to be, right? And so I felt like, doing the podcast with you today, I thought it was kind of a good time to do it, kind of a good chance to reflect on that a little bit.
yeah,
And then as we hit the playoffs, it's kind of about that time. You just don't want to think about kind of that end. And seniors certainly are going through that a little bit.
mhm,
Um, but I agree. I think it's one of those things where you have every young lady's going to have different experiences, certainly
mhm,
with their high school programs, and certainly the calendar for recruiting is staged in the summer, and of course that's going to shift the context of the game and what you're trying to accomplish, and it is going to maybe be a little more self-serving. And at the same time, it's just another way to keep playing too. And I think that was kind of where we were coming from, as parents, and certainly as a coach, to try to help continue to get you to grow as a player. And
mhm,
you had mentioned to me that, obviously you had said certainly your senior year, but um, do you feel like there was any juncture, maybe even your junior year? I mean, I know we were dealing with COVID and playing with masks and testing and all that kind of good stuff, each and every day it felt like. But,
mhm.
obviously you played a pretty big role as a junior. You were starting at that point. Um, do you feel like there's any juncture, maybe even in your junior year, that you felt like the light bulb kind of kicked on in terms of, now, I preface this though, because your role dramatically changed
Yeah.
from your junior and senior year. Maybe talk about what you felt like your role was as a junior, and then what you felt like clicked for you, and then maybe you can kind of double down, with what your role looked like as a senior.
Um,
I guess I'm
well,
going to quick pause
senior.
this. While you get a
Okay.
moment to think about this, quick pause this.
Okay.
So obviously your sophomore year, everybody, the COVID season here in the state of Washington, what did we get? Did we get 6 games, 8 games?
It was 8 games, and then it was, like, I swear 5 games in 5 days. We had a lot of
Oh, that's
back-to-back
right.
games.
That
There was,
is
like, 3
right.
in a row.
And we were just gassed.
Yeah.
Had to get it all in a month. Yeah, I think you're right. So yeah, so we had a COVID season here in the state of Washington, and did we not have it in June? Was it not in? Didn't it
It
go like fall, winter, or no, fall, spring, winter?
Yes, ended the school year with basketball.
Ended with basketball. Yeah. So you had a short, really abbreviated 8-game season, which I mean, shoot, uh, that's where we were kind of stuck. It was really felt
Mhm.
like the only thing you were really getting was the club season, and of course, first of all, being a coach, but being dad here, here I've waited 15, 16, 17, 18 years to get to this point to be able to get to coach you and
Mhm.
presumably Casey at some point, and to lose out on one of those years, I'm still bitter. There's no doubt about it.
I was nervous it was gonna trickle and affect the rest of the years.
Yeah. Well,
I was nervous.
shoot. I think we all kind of were thinking about that a little bit, but anyways, so kind of back to my question a little bit ago. Your role as a junior. What was
Mhm.
that? Do you feel like? And then how did it dramatically change as a senior?
My junior year, we obviously had the 4 key components, Baylor,
Yep.
Chloe, Cam, and
Mhm.
Corey.
Who were all
And that
seniors that
was
year.
yeah, all seniors, and it
Yep.
was Chloe came back from injury.
She
She was
did.
out COVID year.
Yep. Torn ACL.
Yeah, and so
And
I
quick
didn't
pause.
f
I'm gonna pile on here. So to kind of give you some perspective, those 4 young ladies were uber talented. We had a D1
Mhm,
soccer player in there, Trackster, and Chloe Pattison. We had
mhm,
a D2 basketball player, Baylor Thomas, with that group, and then we had 2 D1 post players in Corey and Camille. So there was some talent in that pool
mhm.
of hoopers, and then there was you,
Yeah, this little
amongst
lost
others, of
me.
course. Anyways, go ahead.
I didn't feel as if I had too much pressure on me, but since starting and them being 4 seniors and super talented, obviously, I don't compare to their talent at all. My main focus was to, like, just get them the ball
Yeah.
type, like, to be that assist, to be and I wanted to be a super solid player for them because knowing them for a few years, you kinda know their limits, and you don't really
Uh-huh.
wanna mess up too many times because 'cause you'll get a little talked to during the game, so I just wanted to be that steady player for them so they could rely on me. Maybe one of them, Baylor Chloe, maybe isn't having the best game. I just wanted to be a solid, like, backup or something, backup point guard.
Yeah.
Um, I did feel like a majority of the games, though, I ended up being kind of the main point guard and push Baylor and Chloe off the ball to get them
Yep.
more open shots.
Yep.
Um, I do specifically remember, my sophomore year, the COVID year,
Hmm.
where just watching film, it was a lot of, like, me to the posts or I just wanted to get them as many touches as I could,
Yep.
but I still didn't feel that much pressure because I also had Perla, who
Sure.
was also s my age.
Yep.
We kinda were I mean, we played together for a while. Um, she also took some pressure off of me because I know that she could also provide a lot of stability for the team also,
Yep.
and so I didn't feel too much pressure. I definitely was still really nervous my junior year. Still trying to figure it out and kind of figure out where I like fit in on the team. I think the light bulb for me really clicked during playoffs.
Yeah.
Specifically, I feel like the East Lake game at
Mhm.
EVCC.
Okay. Tough one.
Um,
So to give some
that
context there, we had seen, well, I guess the bag up, won a league title
mhm.
that year. Special, especially with, and I'm going to give that group a ton of credit because we had to test every day.
Mhm.
We were very, very diligent about masking up at practice and doing everything possible to just keep that season alive
Yeah.
and get ourselves to a place where hopefully we could get to a state tournament. I mean, that was ultimately the kind of the bottom line. And to be able to win a league title that year, obviously had some expectations, and we combined with Kinko. And for those that kind of follow the state of Washington and Kinko basketball, particularly 4A Kinko basketball, it's been the class of 4A basketball in our state
Mhm.
the last several years. And so they combined with us at the district tournament. And so gosh, you're gonna have to help me here. We opened with Mount Si, I believe, round 1.
Yeah.
And then I think that went to overtime.
Mhm.
And then we saw East Lake a couple days later
Both
in
home games.
in a semifinal.
Mhm.
Crazy game before we saw Woodinville in the final, and we won't talk about that. But you're talking about so we got to regionals
Mhm.
regardless. We probably played too tight, for the sake of a district title game in Woodinville. Boy, Tatum, Veronica,
Yeah.
they were loaded. But we weren't ready. We weren't ready for that kind of environment. But the regionals in our state is kind of like a play into the state tournament. And I think, felt pretty confident we're going to be ranked in the top 8, which kind of guaranteed yourself a ticket to the Dome regardless. So you're speaking about that regional game, who we saw
Mhm.
East Lake again. So essentially almost 2 weeks
Yeah.
apart. But that East Lake game for you said was the light bulb that kind of clicked on.
Yeah, because, maybe I don't really remember playing in the Mount Si Eastlake game before. I don't know
Uh-huh.
why, but the only thing I can remember from the Mount Si game was the girls, Chloe just on the ball, laying on it. That's all I can remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember how I played, but I do remember that Eastlake game at EVCC, um, which was actually I almost fouled out in that game. Had 4 fouls, 3 in the first half.
Oh boy.
I don't know if you remember that.
I don't.
It was
That's true?
awful.
Did I
Yes.
take you out?
Yeah, I got, like, the 3rd one, I wanna say maybe before half.
Oh gosh. So
Yeah,
you're saying
it
that's
was
why we lost then? You picked up 3 fouls first half?
could be. I'm scrappy.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
Um, but I feel like I honestly thought we had that game, um, and I felt like the energy was super high with everybody. I felt like my confidence was really high that game,
Hmm.
um, and so I thought, like, "Okay, my confidence is high, and it hasn't really been too high all year long." I was like, "Maybe it's finally clicking."
Hmm.
But and we had a good run. We didn't play awful at all. Like, we put up a fight, we just couldn't pull it out in the end. Um, but I can specifically remember that game. Maybe Kentwood also. I don't that wasn't a playoff game, was it?
No, that was a couple weeks before the district tournament. That was a big one
Mhm.
too, for sure. Where
That one
obviously we had
that was
lost
fun.
Camille there for a stretch
Yeah.
because she rolled her ankle at Kentwood, and that's what made that run with Mount Si and East Lake the first time in the district tournament more impressive was because we did that without her. I mean,
Yeah, I forgot about that.
we tried to keep her out as long as we possibly could. We didn't even play here. Oh, did she play a little with East Lake? I
The
felt like she
second time.
wanted to or was ready to. I can't remember.
There's a lot of games where she was suited up and ready to go.
Yeah.
I think
Um,
maybe.
but obviously that year, you're a complimentary piece. So you're probably,
Mhm.
shoot, fifth option and just probably that steadying force.
Yeah.
But when you're a coach's kid, you know, freshman year, maybe even junior year, do you feel like there's maybe a little bit of a different responsibility, maybe an unfair expectation? Not necessarily, I guess you could say for me, that's kind of what this whole thing is
Mhm.
for. Do you feel like there was an unfair maybe expectation from dad, or do you feel like maybe your teammates kind of looked at you a little bit differently because your dad was that coach or anything like that those first couple of years? I'll leave your senior year alone because I think that's a little bit different. But what about kind of growing up though?
I would definitely say I did feel like the girls would always treat me a little bit differently than maybe they did with each other just because they didn't know if I'd go tell right back the
Yeah.
coach or something, which I told them of course, we've talked you always tell them about the whole tryouts thing, and
Yep.
but
And
that's
what is that thing I say at tryouts? Because I think this is really important and something for me that I felt like was crucial for you and your experience. So what would I do each tryout if you want to explain that?
that you would say that I have nothing to do with it, and you don't talk about it with me,
Have nothing to do with what in particular? Be specific.
with teams.
Oh, so making
And
teams, right?
yes, and you don't split up teams until a few days before, like, first game.
Yeah,
It's just whoever is on any team, and then you
right.
split up the teams a few days later.
So you're more speaking about like tryouts where it's natural, you have a lot of brand new girls that are maybe giving hoops a shot or
Mhm,
we have returners. And so one of the things that we did at Lake Stevens, we did it this year at Issaquah for sure, is we try out, have our 3 days of tryouts. I think that's pretty usual, although I've heard some programs do just two.
mm,
But 3 days worth of tryouts, and for us, we just got down to a number. So between our three programs, our C team, JVs, and varsity group, it could be anywhere from I don't know, 30 to 34 girls.
mhm,
At Lake Stevens, our C team program is on a different campus, and then varsity and JVs we have or had on campus, and so that number was typically like 18 to 22, and that's a pretty good number. And we go that route for a variety of reasons. At Issaquah this year, same kind of concept, but the C team is on campus,
mhm,
and so this year we kept 30 total altogether, and we had a pretty good balance. But we just get to a number, and so we keep it that way until really. I think what's kind of been the norm has been the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. It gives us 8, 9, 10 practice days. But one of the things that Ella's speaking to is I was very upfront. The tryouts is um, she has no idea. Don't go to Ella and ask her about what teams are or what teams are going to look like or anything like that because I just wouldn't involve her in those conversations. That's just something
mhm,
that I felt like as a dad and as the coach, it was one of those things that she needed to be a player just like everybody else and needed to not be the one that was in the middle. And so I always made it a point to really make sure up front. And that way with kind of coaching decisions too. Ella certainly wasn't afraid to share what her thoughts were on certain things with regards to basketball. But ultimately, that was between myself and our staff. And I felt like I needed to be very diligent about that at all times, because it wouldn't have been fair to Ella. And obviously the girls in the program, if, Ella always had an advantage or a leg up just on different things that were going on, because then that's going to put really unfair pressure on her. And then certainly kind of eventually at some point come back to me and have to deal with that. And so I think that's something that you speak to.
yeah.
How about like throughout the season though? I mean, was there anything, any season, I guess, I don't know if you can speak to this from maybe different years, but being a coach's kid and like team dinner stuff or hanging out with the girls or locker room things. Did you feel like there was ever any reservations, or did it feel like you could be just as much a part as everybody else?
I would say they were pretty good for most things, honestly. There would always be a few times where maybe like pregame locker room,
Yeah,
it would be a joke. We have a bad word in a song, and they're like, don't tell Edens." I'm like, guys, it's okay.
yeah,
Like it's fine. But it would always just be jokes and stuff. And
yeah,
the only thing is, I've sometimes maybe like my junior year, especially when like you had those four.
yep,
If I messed up, sometimes I felt like they would be a little nervous to, like, come at me for it or, like, kinda,
sure,
like, yell at me,
yep,
which, honestly, I would be fine with it. I wouldn't be like, "You can't yell at me, I'm a coach's
uh,
kid," type thing, like, you can
right,
treat me like another player, like, you can yell
yeah,
at me like you yell at each other, like, it's
yep,
okay.
yep,
I'm not gonna yell back. Like,
yeah,
obviously, I did something wrong, but
yeah,
they were usually pretty good about that. Speaking senior year, I think my confidence with yelling at people, it definitely switched.
uh-huh,
Um, just because I had like you talked about earlier, it's such a big leadership role my senior
yep,
year. It's
yep,
just a big jump than any other year that I've had. And so I felt like and knowing basketball so well with being around you and understanding you and
Yep.
knowing the plays since middle
Yeah.
school,
Yeah.
um, and the girls trusted me a lot with that too. They always knew it was with a grain of salt and kinda how when you, let's say, yell at girls, but you add a little something, like, nice at the end or
Yeah.
to make sure, like, they gotta fix something, but it's, like, out of love or something.
Yep.
And so I would start to add those in at the end of, like, comments or something to make sure, like, I'm not mad at you, just, like, fix it or something.
Yeah. Sure.
Um, which I feel like those little things go a long way because then, like, the girls are gonna, like, respect me a lot more.
Sure.
Um, but I felt like they, like, trusted me, that's why they never really had a problem
Yep.
with, like, me, like, talking to them is
Mm.
because they trusted me a lot with the experience I had.
I
For
think
example
go ahead, finish this.
I was gonna say, for example, specifically, like, Cameron Wentz.
Uh-huh. One of my
She
faves.
Love Cameron. She would
Yeah, K wins.
always come up to me and say how appreciative she was for, like the main thing I would yell out would be the defenses because we
Yeah.
switch them a lot and stuff, and
Yep. Yep.
she would need reassurance because, sometimes Cam gets lost, right? But it's all good. But she
Uh-huh.
would always, like, come up to me and say how she would appreciate it, and she'll always ask me questions, and I think when the girls ask me questions too, like, even if it's during the game, Perla would do it too.
Yep.
It also makes me, like, feel good, like, okay, they feel comfortable enough to
Yep.
ask me, and they don't just see me kinda, like, scared type since I'm
Sure.
coach's kid.
I like it. So you used the kind of a buzzword for me here this year, and it's something that our girls at Issaquah talked about, and that's the word trust.
Mhm,
And the whole notion that um, the girls at some point, whether it was, you know, whether it was maybe your junior year and maybe being kind of that fifth starter, we'll say, I think I can use that in that kind of fashion
mhm,
to your senior year and you have really kind of everybody probably looking up at you, being a starting point guard and
mhm.
like you mentioned, kind of been around the program and knowing kind of what we're trying to accomplish and how important do you feel like that was in terms of like the transition? Because when you graduate four starters like we did,
Yeah,
the girls obviously had to lean on you a little bit in terms of that trust and at times when you need to be critical, they were okay with that.
yeah.
Like
I
how
would yeah.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say too, because if you don't have that, ultimately what you have to say is gonna be pretty shallow. I don't think
Mhm.
you get the buy-in.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think you've earned some of that credibility based on, your experiences. And if you think about your career a little bit, you kind of went the whole gauntlet. You weren't
Mhm.
like a superstar from the jump. You
Yeah.
swung early and then you were a full-time, I guess, full-time player COVID season, if you want to count it that
Mhm.
way. Then we became a starter as a junior. And then, by the time you're senior, you had to be that senior leader
Yeah.
by example, almost that
Mhm.
extension of coach on the floor, which ultimately kind of has led, I think, you to want to be a coach at some point, which we've kind of
Mhm.
talked about a little bit and think is amazing. And um, but you've gone through the whole experience, and I guess I have to throw it in there. You became a second team all league player, even though basketball wasn't your
I forget
number
about that,
one.
to be honest.
Me too.
Basketball is my number 1. It always will be. Everybody always asks me here at
Yeah.
Western, like, "Oh, like, what's your, like?" Because they know I love basketball, and they're like, "Oh, like, what's your favorite sport?" I instantly basketball.
Hmm.
If I had the talent, I would be trying out for the Western team right now and playing for Carmen and Stacy if I could,
I like
but
it. Well,
I just enjoy it.
I wanted to get back to you had mentioned how, now I wasn't aware of this. You're saying you use, like, I like to use love as a noun.
Mhm.
You're telling me you use love as a noun with your teammates at times? You did
I
that last
would
season?
with, like, I would have to use different things for, like, different people. With,
Okay.
like, Cameron, I
Yep.
would use sweets. It'd be
Yes.
something like
Okay.
it would be something I'd, like, make it super, like, weird.
Uh-huh.
and, like, goofy, but I
'Cause
can't
that's your
remember what
humor.
they were. Yeah,
Okay,
but
so, like, I with you guys, I would be frustrated, like, I would say let me give an example. Like, quit throwing one-handed passes, love. So,
Mhm,
I can have a stern voice,
mhm,
but because I end it with the word love as a noun,
yeah,
essentially, it kinda softens the blow a little bit. Or my
yeah.
favorite one, of course, that has been fun with, the girls is when I figure out your middle names, right?
Yes, that one's fun.
So instead of cursing, because I'm not a big cuss guy, as you mentioned, we try to keep
Mhm,
it PG at practice with our
PG.
music.
Mhm,
Um, if I find out your middle names, if I use your middle name during the course of a game,
you
it's a
messed
fun
up.
th- it's a fun thing,
Yeah,
and it's better than the alternatives, right? But it also, I think, it gets you to smile too for a second as well. I think it
it
gives you
does.
guys some gravity, don't you think?
I think especially, like, when being on the bench and you turn and you ask the bench, like, "Oh, like, what's Parla's middle name?" Parla
Yeah.
doesn't even have a middle name, that's not a good example. Um, she doesn't, but you turn and you ask middle name, like, Cameron,
Yeah.
and then you say it, and then she, like, will always turn and look and
Yeah.
give you a smile 'cause she knows, but that especially was always a fun thing because it would make everybody laugh and but
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the been a good thing too for myself. Coaching girls is much different than coaching boys, and it's one of those things that
Mhm,
I've really enjoyed is girls love to be coached and they appreciate being coached hard as
mhm,
long as they know that how much you care for them. And I think that's something that having been a coach's kid around the program for 18 years, your whole life, you got to experience with different eras, at Lake
mhm,
Stevens. And I think ultimately you wanted to kind of classify it as your own. And while a year ago at this time, it's something we didn't want to ponder where we were and kind of what the end was going
mhm.
to look like. Ultimately, I think, our tearful end was about the 18 years. I don't think it was
Yeah,
about certainly how special it was for you to play for dad. Um, but also for me to get to coach you too. I think it's one of those things that, and I know we've shared this in a car ride or two on the way home for sure.
mhm,
Um, but ultimately, what I got to experience, way exceeded, and I was generally concerned, especially with COVID, and like you mentioned earlier a little while ago. What if this trickles over? Like, what if we can only have a half season your junior year, and I mean, you just play doomsday scenarios. It's just awful, but it far exceeded, even if we didn't have COVID and it far exceeded anything that I probably would have imagined. I mean,
yeah,
I know we had really hoped to try to get to the state tournament last year, and we definitely were knocking on the door and just missed.
mhm,
Um, but we got to experience one, and that was certainly a full circle moment. We shared the baby pictures, of course,
yeah.
before at our one of those early ones at Lake Stevens, and then to get your own. That's something I know that both of us will never forget. What's your fondest memory of getting to play at a state tournament um, there that year? You got one?
Well, besides me almost costing our first game and ending our season, besides that, and then missing 2 free throws later,
Okay.
oh, that's,
Well,
of
let's
course,
let's
my
let's just quickly replay that here real quick so we can give our. So you say costing us. What happened late in the fourth quarter? You remember pretty clearly?
I decide to throw a cross-court pass to
Uh,
Baylor,
yep.
and with a defender right there, defender interferes it, goes other way for a lay-in, Baylor fouls, she gets an and 1,
Yeah.
misses the free throw
Yep.
because they're up 2, misses the
Yes.
free throw. I get subbed
Huge.
out, of course, because I'm about to bawl my eyes out.
Yep.
Just cost us because it was the one and done first game.
Right.
Loser out, winner
Yep.
winner gets 2 games,
Gets
right?
2 more for sure. Yep.
And, of course, I'm on the bench, the team's trying to calm me down because 'cause I'm like,
Yep.
"Oh my gosh, what did I just do?" and Baylor ends up taking it full court,
Yep.
um, coast to coast, lays it in, and it goes into overtime, and we end up pulling it out. I did not wanna go back in
Yep.
overtime at all, and you did. You put me back in, and I almost just stayed sitting down because I was like, "I don't wanna do this right now. I'll wait till another game. I need to be done."
Well, and I think what's hard too, and this isn't just you, it's as coaches, you're gonna have players go through mistakes like that, like they're just at massive moments, and
Mhm,
everyone knows, 99% of the time your players are doing the best that they possibly can. And it happens just at kind of the worst juncture. You make a mistake. And so you got to believe in your players, your own kid, because you can. And ultimately, I think what makes it hard, and especially just the gravity of the event and a loser out scenario, which compounds it by it feels like
mhm,
100. You're just trying to last and stay in that thing as long as you possibly can. And as we had talked about, we knew we had to win two to try to get the trophy day, which is always our number one goal.
mhm.
And so, and you just don't want to be one of the first teams done on that Wednesday.
Yeah,
You want to keep rocking and rolling. But getting to the overtime, we had to throw you back in there.
yeah,
I think Pearl had a struggle moment or two in there, and um, I think also what kind of makes that tough is, and especially from your perspective, is we've had so much joy and success at Lake Stevens and the number of state tournaments that we've been to. This is kind of finally your chance to do one yourself.
mhm.
So I'm
That's
a
what was so hard is because I was like, "I've waited 17 years to get here,
little.
and I just screwed it up." I was like, "No way." But I I did not wanna go back in, let me tell you.
Yeah,
But
but we
what's
found our
funny
way.
yes.
We found our
Mhm,
way. Barely, got to that next day. Shoot, I can't even explain probably the emotions in that for certainly you and I, but obviously our team. I think it was just a tremendous amount of relief, and we played so well the next day against Pasco. We know we really felt like we let one slipped away, and
yeah,
we get the Pasco one. We obviously are in a Final Four. We guarantee a trophy. We were so good defensively, really most of the tournament. Camus obviously a different level, but
yeah,
we just couldn't put the ball in the hoop, and that sometimes happens there. When you think about those 3 days, when you think about the state tournament, and obviously what basketball has meant to our family,
mhm,
and having been around it, obviously your brother was there from Wazoo, Case and
mhm.
mom were there. When you think about to kind of our family experience, maybe kind of separating yourself from Lake Stevens here a little bit. What did you feel in terms of when you finally had a chance to kind of step away here or there, or maybe you had a chance to kind of decompress? How would you reflect on that experience, just kind of collectively as a fam?
It felt so surreal. Just I remember during warm-ups just taking a second to be like, "I'm on the court right now,
Yeah.
playing,"
Yep. Yep.
knowing I was starting to. It was weird because we would always I remember as a little kid watching the Palco twins, we had ribbons in our hair,
Yep.
and we would be watching from the stands, and just then being able to play and then to have, of course, our entire family there. I'm pretty sure your parents were there too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But just and they've been watching for years.
I think my uncles, they're very, very much regulars at the state tournament. I think I had my uncle and my cousin there. We had a ton of family for sure, different
Pretty
junctures.
sure Amy was there,
Yeah.
but just to have everybody there and the fact that Carter could make it down too
Yep.
was that just right there definitely made me feel just so, like, relieved, and it like I said earlier, it just felt so surreal. It was
Yeah.
just like, "Whoa."
Yeah.
But it was really cool. Like I said, during warm-ups, I remember, like, finding them in the stands and
Mm-hmm.
just that moment of, like, "I can't believe, like, we're here right now."
Yeah.
Like, out of these years of just
Yep.
watching and
Yep.
watching and
Yep.
to finally play,
Mm-hmm.
it was really cool.
Love it. All right, so let's talk through your senior year here a little bit, and then I want to get some rapid fire questions. We're going to get close to an hour here, so I don't want to go too much beyond that.
Okay.
So junior year starter, big opportunity. We know we have a very, very good team. Senior year rolls around. What are you thinking changes for you going into your senior year? Whether it's summer basketball or even in November, what do you think are the expectations for you as a player and what have you?
Oh gosh.
For
I
you,
def
I'm not saying this is going to be like a blanket for everybody, but for
Okay.
you in that transition, obviously we're going through pretty big changes, and I know we
Mhm.
both don't want to take a step back. I mean, I was hoping we could find our way again. I felt like if we could grow a little bit and get some help from a couple of our young kids, we could probably find our way. And so, but that
Mhm.
meant our expectations for you were going to change. So, what did you feel
Yeah.
like those expectations were?
Um, Gosh, going in, I was definitely nervous because we just lost, of course, 4 superstar kids,
Yep.
and I remember specifically when we played Arlington, how they just
Hmm.
pressure you in full court, and
Yep.
being like that mostly, like, main point guard my junior year, I didn't handle the ball very well. My
Yep.
confidence wasn't there, and so that's I remember thinking during summer ball, that's what I wanted to work on, is not turning my back when I have pressure,
Right.
and just being able to handle the ball,
Yep.
and get the team started, into things so we could be structured. Um, I just like what you told me is like 8 to 9 points each
Yep.
game, and
Hmm.
so just that was, like, reassuring. It would, like, calm me down from, like, because you didn't even speak, like, just be you would say, like, "Be solid," and
Yep.
stuff, and it wasn't ever, like, "Don't turn the ball over," or something like
Yep.
that. Like, it was
Yep.
always just the bigger picture.
Yep.
And I
Something
would
constructive. Yep.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and maybe the little things I would think of, like, myself. But when you would just say, like, "I just want you to hit, like, 8 to 10 points," it was usually 9 points, could never get to 10, always was just 9.
That's right.
Couldn't get over it.
Yeah.
Um, I think my highest scoring game last year was actually against Issaquah.
I think it was. Was it not 11? Did you
It
not
was
get to 11?
11. It
Yeah.
was 11. Yep. That was
The
early
irony.
season too.
Yeah.
I know. Um,
Now,
but
that's
yeah,
not to say you didn't have a couple chances to get to 11. We
oh,
won't
so many
speak about those
chances.
couple of games in there, but nonetheless.
Just lambs. Goodness. But expectations definitely jumped. Definitely had I feel like in the beginning had a bit more pressure. I
Yep.
definitely felt pressure, but I kinda just let it go. And I
Yep.
feel like just within that season, my confidence grew just with having the basketball in my hands. Like,
Uh-huh.
I felt confident asking for it to get
Yep.
us running into things because I
Yep.
could junior year, I was probably a little timid to like, "Hey, like, hand me the ball so we can get things running."
Sure.
And then moving to maybe, like, mid to end senior year, I was
Yep.
confident, and so I could really
Yep.
get things moving, and I think it having that confidence just the rest of my game kinda just
Yep.
relaxed, and I could just go play.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. Um, let's speak to Glacier Peak here real quick. How'd game one go?
I got ran. First quarter, it
uh,
was like 12-2, 12-4 in, like, 3 minutes, 'cause it
I
was
shared
first game
this.
was at their place,
Yes. Do you remember the
quad
score?
night.
It was quad night. Was it?
Mm. Mhm.
You don't do a lot of quad nights in Wesco.
Mm-mm.
Do you remember the score?
The end score, it was it was 20,
25. I think it was
20, 25.
51-25.
Yeah.
Do you remember our three-point shooting that night?
Cameron Wentz in the corner. That was our only three-pointer the entire
Oh,
game.
geez. Of all people, Cameron wins?
Cameron Wentz was our only three-point make in the corner of the first half.
And we love Cameron.
Mhm.
One for 25.
Mhm.
I shared
Worst
that with
shooting game ever.
I shared that with the Issaquah girls today, and they seemed a little flabbergasted at that. But my point being, that was a rough night on a lot of levels.
Mhm.
Kind of the midpoint of our season. and probably opened up a lot of questions for us, collectively as a group. Like, boy, I don't know
It made me nervous. I was like, "Oh,
if
uh-oh."
we're really that good. So fast forward a few weeks, Glacier Peak comes back to our place. What do you remember about that one?
Opened up first quarter 19-0.
Yeah,
I think quarter ended 19-2. They got one
19-2. Yep,
bucket,
yep,
and energy was through the roof. I'm pretty sure love Coach Hill, no hate against them. I was pretty confident we won that game just after the first quarter
yeah,
because I don't think I've ever through all that was probably the most enjoyable basketball game I've ever played.
yeah,
Just the energy from everybody.
yep,
Like, there was not one person that was upset that game.
yeah,
There may have been a few kids that didn't play as much, but no matter what, everybody was super high energy, and I felt like just wanting the redemption against GP
yeah.
was everybody wanted it. And I think we really started playing as a team and started turning things over, and so that's what was so fun about that game. And it's GP. You always
Sure,
wanna
which
beat
is
GP.
always, yeah, it's been a natural rival for Lake Stevens for a long time. Coach Hill's a great coach. We obviously are really close with him, and he does a great job. I think it's one of those just really, really strange, circumstances that with as poorly as we played at their place, I think one thing I tried to sell you guys on about that game in particular is the second half. It was such a rough first half. The second half, we actually were okay. I mean, we stayed with them. We just didn't shoot it very well. And I think
Yeah.
trying to prioritize that as kind of maybe the hopefully the singular factor maybe helped us kind of hopefully plant a little bit of a seed for the next round. And we felt like we kind of maybe had let potentially league title get away by getting beat by Kamiak that year.
Yeah.
Um, but I think once we had turned the tables at our place, uh, we really took off.
Yeah.
Collective as a group and accrued a bunch of momentum. And as we kind of talked about a little bit ago, we're knocking on the door for sure in that last year.
Mhm.
Um, Probably springboard because of that win. I do recall well, and that film's fun to watch because the kind of hugs that you guys gave each other at the end when we took you out, and
I
you
have
start
the
to
screen recorded on my phone coming out and
those are
cheers, waiting
special.
for a hug.
You can
Mhm.
see the joy in you guys. And ultimately I think that's kind of something that we try to keep as constants in our program, and something that I think you did a really good job with in terms of maybe bridging the gap from myself, especially with new players, you
Mhm.
understanding, and you had mentioned this even on the court, but off the court, understanding kind of where I'm coming from, and
Yeah.
maybe helping those that are new that don't understand what it takes to win, what it takes to be a great teammate, what it takes to, have success at a high level when there's expectations.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah. For sure.
Do you think there's any unfair expectations about you coming in as a coach's kid?
Mm, on if anything, it's not never from you, it's from other people.
Uh-huh.
Because I feel like a lot of people expect coach's kid to be this superstar because you've been around basketball for so long.
Yeah.
You expect the coach's kid to just, I don't know, pretty much just be
Yeah.
that player, that like number one player for the team,
Right.
and of course I was never really that number one player. Like I mentioned earlier, I was never the top leading scorer. That was
Sure.
never a need for me. I my biggest thing was to just make sure the team knew what they were doing to be structured, so then we can get those superstar players on the team to get those
Mhm.
points, to get those touches that we could.
Sure. Sure.
So, but yeah,
What's
I
y
never would think those expectations would come from you at all.
Yeah, good. I hope not.
Mm.
What's your fondest memory?
From basketball in general, high school.
Sure.
Oh gosh, it's hard not to say that GP game just
You're gonna
because
say that
that
it won over even the state tournament trip?
Well, definitely state tournament trip. I think
Over league title, over you got
gosh,
some memories to stack
I
up there.
do. One of them is, there's definitely a few. I don't think I could pick one. There's definitely, like, a top 3 to 5, but one of them is probably after that win with against Rogers,
Uh-huh.
having me almost causing it, and everybody, of course, we're rushing to center court,
Yep.
but, of course, girls are celebrating stuff, and there's actually a picture, but it's you and I that are
Mhm.
celebrating together instead of, us. I mean, of course, we celebrated with the team, but that was my
Yeah.
instant reaction was just to run to you.
Yeah.
And I do remember, though, after we left the court, I kinda had there's a picture also, had a breakdown of
Yes.
what the heck
Yes.
did I just do? But, that was
Yeah.
definitely one of them.
Um, what was your toughest moment?
Last game?
Oh, okay. I guess I didn't preface that very
Outside.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. Any other tough moments though? Maybe just I think that's obviously be a given. I mean, that obviously just shows how close, we had gotten
Yeah.
to each other and certainly through the game. And, shoot, let's go back to what summer league at Linwood High School and your peach Russell Westbrooks and Coach
Mhm.
Merrifield and
Yeah.
and you fast forward to that last one. I give Coach Merrifield a ton of credit because at the end of that Mount Si game at Lake Washington last year,
He
he's
was in
like, I couldn't
tears.
do it. Yeah, he
He was
couldn't
in
do
tears too.
it. He's like, I had to step back. I couldn't get in the way because we pack up our bags and get the ball back. And but any aside from that one, we're just gonna go with that. Any other like tough moment, any juncture, like man, this is hard, or anything of that sort.
Besides just last games of every season, to be honest, even when I just remember also before playing for you,
Yep.
for some I would just get so emotional, even
Yeah.
though it was, um,
Well,
probably
that's your dad's fault though. Your dad's too emotional about that stuff, and
that's true. I can't see you having a hard
yeah,
time because
you get so close to each group. That's why this time of the year is so fun
mhm,
because of the intensity that's attached to it.
mhm.
Um, on a personal level, you want to see these young ladies have success, and it's ultimately why you put in the work. And so when you invest as much time, effort, and energy into your craft and as coaches into your young ladies, uh, first of all, it's been a blast to do. That's the
Yeah,
number one. So you don't want to be done. That's the thing that stinks, as
mhm.
you know. But also, you get the memories and the chance to reflect a little bit, and um, it just what it takes to get back there. It's you got to do it all over again
Yeah,
if you want to hang in there, and that makes that hard for sure.
yeah.
Um, Last couple of things, and then we'll wrap this up.
Okay.
Why, or let me rephrase this. You have mentioned, and we have talked about you wanting to be a coach.
Mhm.
When do you feel like you said, "Oh, I this is something I want to do," and why do you want to be a coach?
Honest senior year, towards the end of it, just like I mentioned earlier, just really understanding it more and
Yep.
seeing what you're wanting from the team, seeing the way you see the game. Of course, up to, like, my IQ for the
Yeah.
game,
Hmm.
and so I was like, I wanna coach basketball now because I wanna
Yeah.
have that relationship with those girls, I wanna have that type of IQ to where even I was surprised on some of the things that you would say, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's really smart."
Yeah.
Um, of course, I wanna be a coach because you're a coach, and maybe full circle it, and I know
Yeah.
Merrifield has said that he's wanted to coach with me.
Yep.
But I've been thinking about that a lot recently too, about one day maybe I'm your assistant coach or something, and
Sure.
but I would love to coach like you also. Like, I wouldn't wanna coach like anybody else. I love the way you coach, the way you, like, speak, the way you, like, interact with the players, the way you interact with other coaches, the relationships you have with coaches.
Yep.
'Cause I swear you know everybody in 4A basketball, 3A.
Yeah.
Even
Well,
when during Moses
when you
Lake.
get as old as I am right now, hon, and you've been doing it a while, you tend
Mhm.
to get to know a lot of people, but
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well,
Well.
this has been a lot of fun,
Mhm.
and there's probably no bigger honor than to say that you want to get into the craft, and we speak of Coach Schumacher quite fondly, and
Mhm.
she always has done a great job at Inglemore, and we coached together there for a little bit, and so and then I don't know if I might have made you aware, but Kristen Glick is coaching at Kamiak. She's
Yeah.
helping the JV group, and so we're starting to see more and more young ladies in the game, and I'm always a big advocate of we need more young ladies in the game, coaching the girls'
Yeah.
game, because we don't have enough. But one of the things that I hope I did well with yourself in our program is ultimately try to be as equitable as possible across the
Mhm.
board with you and certainly the girls that were in our program each and every year. And at the same time, hopefully not put an unfair pressure on you from me.
Mhm.
And, I felt like it was really important for you to have just as much of a high school experience,
Yeah.
just like everybody else, without already just, subconsciously having pressure because you're a coach's kid. And
Yeah.
I think, and I hope, um, we did that the right way. And I certainly think you rose to the occasion when others probably thought you might not.
Mhm.
And I know we had talked about that, when we decided to make the decision to, have you become a varsity player, to eventually have you start, to being a team leader your senior year, we needed to make sure that was the right decision to make. And every
Yeah.
step of the way, you validated that. You were ready for that. And I think
Mhm.
that, for those coaches that are maybe about to embark on that journey with their own sons or daughters in this case, um, that's probably the biggest thing you gotta be careful with. I think you gotta
Yeah.
not jump the gun, and have good conversations that keep you out of the middle. I think is
Mhm.
probably the other big thing that was really really good, about what we did and or tried to do. Now, I am gonna pick a little bone with you because there were a few car rides home where your dad should be a little grumpy about how the game went, or we didn't play very well, or whatever else. And I can't even get a word in, and you're already grumpy and saucy about how he played. And I have to be the good cop. No, that's supposed to be the other way around. You're supposed to be the good cop, and I'm supposed to be the bad cop. Now,
I
um,
specifically remember a few games too, just from last year where that's the hard part about away games is you gotta
yeah,
hold it because bus rides, you gotta hold it in,
yes,
and on the way home, it's just a free for all, and I
yeah,
I can't because obviously I can't say everything to everybody, and
sure,
I know you'll understand it, and sometimes you'll be like, "Well, I'll go."
yes.
I'm like, "No, uh-uh,
Now, I
F
will
you."
say that's the other part of coaching too, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's something you're gonna have to learn, I think, as you start to, have some of these conversations with players, and, understanding the layers that are behind decisions and conversations. I think this comes from Coach Berg. Coach Berg, well, the Godfathers, Coach Berg and Coach McKinney. We love them to death.
Mhm.
Um, I think Coach Berg had said, "You're generally not as good as you think you are, but you're also not as bad as you think you are too."
Yeah.
And when you wanted to vent, I think that's where I had to come from in most cases. Like, hey, we're
Yeah.
going to be okay. You might not have
Yeah.
wanted to hear it, but the reality is it was probably true. So, but we hear about the car rides and parents and that kind of thing on the way home. And I don't think, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not too shy to be humbled. But I don't think we ever had a car ride home where I was, jumping your case, or
Mm-mm.
telling you played poorly, or anything like that. And I think sometimes when we think about, especially coaches, kids, but coaches in general, but parents in general, because I'm a dad too here in this scenario, you need some time to decompress. And if that was me listening to you to let it rip, that's okay. We're going to leave it at that. And I always chose to, if we were going to address anything basketball wise, especially on a personal level, maybe even between myself and you, and maybe how you play it or something like that. It wasn't going to be until the next day, maybe a
Yeah.
practice, because usually once you've given it that 12-hour, 18-hour little
Yeah.
chance to decompress, right? We're all in a much better space. Usually, not always,
Yeah.
but usually. So,
I mean, if anything, if I didn't play well, it's usually me talking about how bad I played. And then I start getting emotional and I can't talk, so then you gotta start talking and
yeah,
or I'm in the
I
middle of
get
class and you send me a video.
you.
I
Yeah,
specifically remember, I was in class, you sent me, like, this video of me turning the lane, but I passed it and it was wide open,
wide
and
open.
you
Yep.
text me, "What is wrong with this picture right now?"
Yeah,
Um, but like you said, it's you gotta get a good, like, 12 hours
yeah.
and then we can but
I hear
and
you.
watching
All right.
film also.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. Well, you're going to be a great coach. We've talked about this before. I like the knowledge and the IQ, and at some point we'll figure this thing out. We'll see if we can get together. But you got to take care of that running business and school business.
Mhm.
But a lot of fun. Hopefully, Carter will enjoy this on his rides to Pullman, and anybody else that's kind of
Yeah.
listening. And certainly for those that have kids that are coming up, daughters in particular, here in this case, you are always more than welcome to reach out to me. Again, I can't speak fondly enough of my experience with Ella here, and Casey, of course, captured a lot of our pregame moments, which I think were special. We didn't
Mhm.
talk about those much, but just
Yeah.
little things I know that we had, and ultimately we had a great family that supported us along the way on the journey. It has been pretty special. So I appreciate you, love you, and
Love it.
hopefully get to coach with you here real soon. All right. Hey, thanks so much for listening to us today. Little different tracked. Hopefully pick up a thing or two. And for those that are still rolling on here in the fall, or excuse me, in February, good luck in the playoffs. And hopefully we'll see you down the road. Happy hooping.